Good evening and welcome to Inception special podcast. I have an amazing guest tonight, the one and only gangster. I call him a gangster because of his accent, and he's got his cap on tonight. Was it 1930s cap? And my guest tonight, stop moving about because your background keeps coming in the front. I have the one and only Rob Yox from the Full Spectrum Universe podcast host. However, this evening, this is a podcast special. So, Rob, where did your spiritual journey begin?
Where did my spiritual journey begin? The more I think about it, the further back I feel like it goes, right? So a long time ago, I was in high school and we had a history class and I was a terrible student. Mm-hmm. But history was my thing. And we have these tests called the Regents tests. So while I was failing the class, I got a 98 on this particular test that's supposed to cover the first 2 years of high school. Mm-hmm. And I didn't really study for it. And I was able to access the information, mm-hmm. even though I wasn't prepared. And for me, it was a moment that I knew that history was something that was so important to me, and how much I really enjoyed mm-hmm. going over what historical events, facts, what is, what isn't. But what that really stemmed was this urge to find out, right? And that was probably the moment that I started to open up a little bit.
Yeah.
And, my true open awakening was a little bit later, probably a lot of it later. But one of the things that history facilitated was all the things that I thought were, after researching it on my own and not listening to textbooks and things like that, I found a lot that wasn't, right? Or that wasn't represented properly, or, there was so many things. And that gave me this moment in life where it was like this clear moment, like, what else is not completely 100% true, or what else is not completely 100% forthright? What else are they hiding? Mm-hmm. This led me down a path to meet my mentor, a gentleman by the name of Clarence Mitchell, who was a contactee, he was abducted when he was very young. Mm-hmm. And that was probably, I want to say, about 8 years ago. Mm-hmm. About 8 years ago. So throughout that time, from high school to about 8 years ago, I was doing a lot of research on history. Mm-hmm. So, geography and history are some of the things that I'm super adept at. I'm very good at remembering the histories mm-hmm. that more so the histories that are mainstream histories, we'll call them, mm-hmm. right? The Roman Empire, mm-hmm. The big Spanish fleet, mm-hmm. the discovery of America, the Dark Ages, the bubonic plague era, the Ottoman Empire era, World War I, World War II, and
But
Korea.
you never touched ufology before you met your mentor. You didn't touch ufology, did you?
I did, and that's what led me to him. But I didn't realize what I was actually looking at. So one of the things that fascinated me was Washington's diary. Mm-hmm. And Washington's diary talks about moments of missing time, mm-hmm. especially when it was just about to go into the Battle of the Bulge, mm-hmm. or I believe that's the one, or it might be the Battle of Bunker Hill, whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. He was at a crossroads, and it wasn't him who wrote his diary. It was one of his handlers, I guess, or like his manservant.
Yeah.
And there's a moment where Washington can either go left or right, and he doesn't know which way to go. So he walks straight into the woods. Mm-hmm. And as he walks into the woods, he gets down on his knees and he prays, mm-hmm. and he has a vision. And the vision is he's there, and it goes out towards almost like an atmosphere style, where he's looking at the entire map as we see it now, the United States. Yeah. And he saw drops of water falling. And in those drops, he said he saw cities mm-hmm. appearing, the names of cities appearing. Mm-hmm. And that kind of led me towards this moment where I was like, wow, what was that? Right?
Yeah.
Did he have contact with something else? What really was, what was really happening there? And I started to get into like the Dust Bowl era of the United States, and a lot of the farms out there
Mhm.
had people who had encountered strange lights, strange phenomena.
Mhm.
There's one farm owner in particular during the early 1900s, I think it was about 1915, who was very young, came out of his house, looked to his left over his shoulder, and saw a giant silver craft had landed right next to his house. And he said he asked his mother if she saw it. She said no. And he was stared at this craft for about a half hour.
Mhm.
And eventually he saw a man, just like him, or like, just like a human
Mhm.
in a giant silver suit.
Okay.
And that gave me that like extra dimensional or timeline jumping, type of scenario. And a lot of that kind of pointed me towards these phenomena. And I'm like, what's really going on? Then I studied the Appalachian area, and they have these things called the brown lights in a mountain. And all of the different types of lore animals that they say roam the Appalachian area.
Mhm.
And this took me into this area of ufology in the sense of the Greys, the Anunnaki, Zachariah Sitchin, and
Yeah.
all the Sumerian tablets.
Yeah. I think
Egyptian.
everyone's done Zachariah and the Sumerian tablets. So anyone that's in this field at all. I mean, I remember sort of studying all of that way back. It was
Right.
fascinating. And for me, did you find that? I mean, I didn't agree wholeheartedly with Zachariah. I didn't. But however, did you find that was a catalyst by coming in touch with such information that was so way out there? Did you find that did it want to, how can I put it? For me, it was like an obsession. Obsession kicked in to seek. Now there's something more. Did that affect you when you come in contact with that literature?
It wasn't so much the literature itself, right? So I started reading the first book by Zachariah Sitchin, and my friend had given it to me, and he was so excited that I was looking into Zachariah Sitchin now.
Yeah.
So he was a very, very like football player kind of guy, like not, and this was actually in high school too, but it wasn't like, he wasn't of the mainstream mindset.
Mhm.
He was a little bit off, we all thought.
Yeah.
But then me and myself and my friend Johnny, we decided to jump into that field because he was our friend and we were having a good time with him all the time. So we wanted to be able to listen to these discussions he was having with other people and understand.
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
But it did have a profound effect because once I started to realize what that book was saying, I wanted to know more. Like, I always have this drive to learn. And even in high school, I did terrible. It wasn't for lack of wanting to learn. It was my laziness, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't so much that I didn't want it wasn't the right information I was getting in high school.
Yeah.
But I started to funnel that aspect of me loving to learn. And it gave me this just complete plethora of different style books like Chariots of the Gods. And, I mean, it was amazing. So I think when I actually read Chariots of the Gods was when I really jumped into ufology with both feet.
Yeah.
Like really was like, okay, something is going on.
Yeah.
While the Chariots of the Gods and Zachariah Sitchin are a bit similar, they're different, very different.
Yeah.
And then Ancient Aliens started coming on TV, and I was already into it by then. But then I found my mentor by the name of Clarence Mitchell, and he was actually the second person I ever had on my podcast. The first podcast was just me.
Yeah.
He was the second one because what happened was I was looking for other outlets of people who were talking about this type of stuff, and I found his podcast on like one of these crazy like podcast addict apps.
Yeah.
And so I listened, and then there was a number to call in, and I tried to call in, and it wasn't the right time for the show.
Mhm.
So I went through Facebook and I actually went and found him. Like I tried to find out who he was. So I eventually did that, got in touch with him. He told me when the show was. So I called into the show time and time again. And eventually he asked me to co-host the show or come on and speak. And from there, I mean, we did this for like 3 years
Wow.
where I was going on just helping out. And then I met my friend Omar, and then that's kind of how we transitioned into my show. There was a lot of stuff that we talked about through that time period, but that was kind of like the short version of how I got to being a host myself.
Mhm.
I saw that when I was speaking and people were really resonating with what I was saying, and I was having this effect on people. And I know I'm not trying to be cocky, but when we know when you're doing something right. It's
Mhm.
confirmed by the universe,
Yeah.
and it felt right. And I knew people were connecting with me because of what I was saying, which made me think that some of my theories
Mhm.
were spot on because other people are feeling that. It's not
Yeah.
just me feeling that. So that was really the moment of my awakening was that Regents test, because that Regents test brought me to history, and the history brought me to ufology, and then the ufology brought me to podcasting. So it was like, it was a long effect, but
It
I would
seems like when you look back though in hindsight, it's like a natural sequence of events. So, you have to obviously, cognitively, you have to have the skill set. I mean, I've spoken to many podcasters now, and all of us has found that the skill sets that we had prior were transferable to what we do now. So, I mean, and your love of history, I had a love of history too. I studied everything. God, everything I could think of as far as I could go back. And I think for me though, the love of history, every time I was sort of like compelled to research more, but that compelled me to research new research. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, because once you figured out what you were looking at, you wanted the next thing.
Next bit.
And
it goes on.
right. And that ufology brought me to spirituality, because there was within that ufology movement, there was another sub movement, which was sort of new agey, but not quite all of what I see as my spirituality now. It was just a piece of it. And I started to get into ancient India and the Aboriginals and the Native Americans. And instead of looking at where they were and how they were, I looked at who they were as a culture, not so much just the events that took place during their time period. I dove into the gods, the legends, the heroes, the myths.
I same as me, always the gods of any culture, and the myths, the gods and the myths, always the gods and the myths. For me, they were the most fascinating. I'll hold it on that one. I mean, obviously, and there's obviously others like ourselves as well. Why do you think that we were so smitten with, the gods and the mysteries? Because I found that everything I studied in any area, I would always find the gods of that culture. Even when I studied comparative religions, I didn't read it as, as Abrahamic religions. I read it in a different way, an alternative viewpoint. Why do you think at the beginning, when we go through these research periods, that we're looking for these gods? I mean, I think but do you see what I'm trying to say?
Of course. For me, my personal belief is that the ones that we resonate with the most, we probably had some sort of expression during those times, and possibly both, they have a connection to the extraterrestrial races, which we also have a DNA connection to it. So it activated something within our DNA that told our human brain to latch on to these subjects.
It's a bit like Ancestry.com. isn't it? But it's in a
Yes.
different way. You just know there's a reason and there's a connection.
Resonatinghistory.com.
Yeah, there you go.
That's what it is.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, do go on.
No, sure. It's like, when you hit these specific, and once you figure out what you're looking at too with those specific stories and those myths, you're like, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And now, not only are you looking at it from a spiritual standpoint, you're looking at it as like a lesson standpoint. And what are they trying to say? And let's just say a lot of these stories have encounters where humans interact with God-like figures.
Yeah.
So you take those as something that's like, almost extraterrestrial in itself, right? One of those shows I did, I based paranormal, the interaction with entities or spirit all the way back to ancient Rome.
Yeah.
And how they actually didn't call it a spirit. They called it a shade. They called it a fade. But they were still cataloging what they saw.
Yeah,
it was just different terminology. And that was fascinating for me too, just to figure out the different ways that these cultures really described these encounters, just like we're having today.
But it's just labeling. As you go back on the linear time of humanity, it's just language, labeling, context. So it's quite feasible that we may not have the same name for a certain being. However, it's actually the same entity. And the reason I'm raising that again, on the back of what you just said, 2 nights ago, I just recorded a podcast special, and it was just me and Faye Vale. And we had a discussion the other week. And at the end of the discussion, we touched on ET or dimensional beings. And I raised the point of the Bible. And then I said, you know what, let's do a show. And we've done it. It's done. It's recorded and stored. And we went back looking at it for the first time I've ever done it, ever. Alternative history on Jesus, Mary, Gabriel, the 3 wise men, and Moses. And we it's like when you have a map of somewhere and you've got this plastic see-through stuff, whatever it's called, and you superimpose it over. We shifted it with an alternative history. Oh my God, by the time we had finished this podcast, it was like an hour and 20 minutes. It was just made so much sense. Never done it before, a bit taboo. So I do know when it gets released, I may get some remarks. But however,
that's okay. You're just exploring it. You're not saying that anybody's wrong or right.
Theorizing.
Exploration.
Yeah, we were theorizing, and I was giving the parallel between, and the main point that was hybridization, like the hybrids now. How women are taken on craft, they fall pregnant, the hybrid children. And I'm saying, hello, you have a dimensional being telling a woman, Mary, you're going to have a baby, hybrid baby. So I so resonate with what you've just said, how it all starts coming together. And you think, Anyway, sorry,
absolutely.
I digress.
No, well, at its core, an angel or entity that is not of this planet is extraterrestrial.
Yeah.
That's it. And, to go back into Jesus and things like that, and the hybridization of women now, there's a woman that I worked with by the name of Geraldine Orozco, and she was actually just on that, I think it's a Amazon Prime video with Demi Lovato and her search to find extraterrestrials. But, I mean, she has been the hybrid mother of like 50 some odd children, unexplained pregnancies, all types of stuff like that. It was incredible. The work that she does with DNA activation and hybridization is the most thorough, in-depth look at hybridization programs I've ever seen. And she sparks my interest every time she talks. It's crazy.
I mean, for me, it was just, I don't want to give away too much of the podcast for when it comes out. I hope you guys are going to watch it. It's a deep dive into this, really deep. It was just like, I remember when I was researching comparative religions way back, and I'd go to my peers in the field of Abrahamic religions. And I would say, if this woman had this baby without sex and it was what you deem an angel, which is not human, then that can happen to anyone. I remember asking that way back, not really having the relevance to ET. I never even heard of hybrids. This was way back. And I was constantly told by each Abrahamic religion, well, not the Judeo, not that one, but the other two, no, it can only happen for Jesus. That's it. And I'm going, but if it can happen for one, it's a way of life. He was an example. There's a message in the fact. Well, why doesn't no one talk about the message of how she got pregnant? Does that make sense?
Right.
So I remember way back saying, no, this is off. But I recorded the podcast tonight.
Well, Jesus wasn't the first one.
No.
Look at Akhenaten in Egypt.
Yeah,
his father was Ra, the sun god,
yes,
and then Tutankhamun was the hybrid of extraterrestrial and human.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I found the same narrative there. I found it back in many cultures, many civilizations, just like the flood.
16 different stories of Jesus was across the entire world. And it started with ancient Sumeria, and even the Aboriginals had a specific gentleman who was they classified him as a hero, and then the Native Americans did the same thing. And this hero was born of a virgin mother. It was given the gift from the basically, the All Father, or the Spirit, the Great Spirit, and this person rose to prominence in either bringing tribes together or going out and taking a very dark time and bringing peace.
Yeah.
So it's exactly the same sentiment.
It's quite common prior to Jesus, it was common, and after. But the fact is, I've never found anyone doing the deep dive that I did 2 nights ago, looking really into this and giving the parallel of contact with other dimensional beings, becoming pregnant, and blah, 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 and I think this is why, for me, and I know it's for you, with history, when you go into ancient civilizations, and because it's a mystery of it, isn't it? It's a fascination, and because we're always through the journey going, well, where did I come from? Why am I here? Without actually knowing at that point. And history is rich. Yeah, a lot of it is disinformation, but some of us have the ability to see through that. And
discernment.
Yeah.
And that's very true. And when I look into these ancient cultures, I'm actually doing work on myself.
Yeah.
As strange as that sounds. And just to talk about one more thing about Jesus is considering these stories are all over the place.
Yeah.
What if the Roman Empire was just taking literature from all these different past civilizations, wanted to make themselves feel important? So they created this narrative of a Messiah, which would cement their legacy throughout history.
Yeah.
Right.
All of the above is possible.
Yeah.
But the fact is, for me, when I look back at certain, especially, obviously, I'm addicted to Egypt and Akhenaten. When I look back and I can see the parallels to the 21st century,
absolutely,
it's the same. I mean, they all had
cycles. It's all cycles.
Yeah, we spoke 2 nights ago, me and Faye, about all the, the magnificent. Being an artist, I love artwork, and I loved all the Renaissance. I love the paintings and everything, but nearly everyone I saw had a UFO in it. Or a beam of light coming from this UFO in these paintings, and and I'd say to people, what is that?
We don't know. It's just a ray of sunshine.
And
no, it's not. There's a silver disc up there. What are you talking about?
Yeah,
it's no ray of sunshine. It's like Da Vinci.
Yeah,
Da Vinci put it all over the place,
everywhere. Oh my God, everywhere.
Which shows that he tapped into some sort of grid of conscious thinking that had been amplified through that time. Whenever it gets really, really dark, we see these expressions or these forms of art that bring people into like this shift, right? And it's represented in all of those times.
Oh, yes, absolutely. You know, it's like, I think it's the Sistine Chapel, you know, where you've got the supposed God and man going like this. I see that is a symbology. It's symbolic to share a message of the duality of the divine and man. That's how I see it. A lot of the artwork that I look at, I see it as a symbol, a code, hidden in plain sight. So when I look at, and you're looking at the Sistine Chapel or any other of that era of artwork, I see it as a symbology of non-duality, but it had to be hidden. It couldn't be, spoken. I mean, it was bad enough, later on, you'd be burnt as a witch or something, but however, and it was done in such a way that even, the Catholic Church and the whole of Christendom, they never saw it. They never got it.
Right. It's a message for specific people. So if you have the codex,
yeah,
you will understand. Yeah. And if you don't, or you're not to that specific frequency or vibration yet, it'll just seem like a picture of what you're looking at. Mm. And the messaging behind those pictures it's everywhere. It's everywhere, even in the products that we buy today.
Yeah.
It's everywhere on ancient texts and scriptures. Its symbolism is in every facet of life. Like literally, there is not one facet of your life that doesn't have some sort of symbolistic synchronicity with something else.
It's I mean, it's like, in the Matrix film, and I shared a post last week. Someone shared it, a guy I know from this area, he put it up, and I thought it was brilliant. And it was a picture of 3 news articles, and in each news article the woman had a red dress on. It was in the UK paper, and there's a caption next to it: Neo, were you listening to me, or were you watching the woman in the red dress? And the caption next to 3 pictures was all about what's going on in the other timeline. And it was so cleverly done today, the symbology. We all see it now. However, many do not see it still. But going back, because obviously, a couple of history buffs here, and the fun, it's exciting and mysterious. I found through history, you touched upon it a few minutes ago, I found that looking at history eventually led me through the spiritual path to myself. Like you said, you were doing it for you. Did you find that as well? The more that you unpacked this so-called history, no matter what they say happened, you saw it differently, it opened up the spiritual path within?
Definitely. Because when you start looking at some of these ancient cultures, and you're reading about these events that happen, usually these events are stoked by some notion or some type of manipulation, whatever the case may be. But to fully understand it, you would have to go back into what those people believed, because a lot of what they did back then was gauged on what their texts told them to believe. And that gave reason, it gave motive, and it essentially gives you the full picture. And I started with India and the Vedas, which is why I got into like Michael Cremo's work and forbidden archaeology. And then I had was able to have him on my show. It was one of the like crowning moments for me, that I was just like in awe, like not starstruck, but like almost in tears, because it meant the world to me, and it was just a wild moment for me. And then it went into the Aboriginals because of my friends Stephen and Evan Strong, and they talk about how the Aboriginals are man didn't come from Africa like they say. They came from Australia, and Australia was a lot closer to the mainland than it was now. And then that got into the Native Americans, because it felt like that was the next generation from the Aboriginals removed. And then I kind of went back into the Atlanteans and Lemurians, and these. Once we got into like ancient Greece and Rome with Plato and Socrates.
Oh God, Plato! Yes, Plato. I mean, he was. I had all the works of Plato. Oh my God, all of them, everything. And Plato was a key part for me, and especially his analogy of the cave. And I found way back, I found someone had got up on YouTube, and it wasn't
I think
long
that's
after,
my favorite part too. I really think that's my favorite
did
part
a little
too.
animation. You know, I read it, and I read the original, then I read the interpretation, and and then they did the animation of it. And I remember watching it first time again, not getting it, not getting it. And I kept going back, no, not getting it. It was like, keep going. And then I go back and read it again. And then one day it was like, oh, fuck. He knew. And I tell you why I kept getting the old fuck, oh, shit, oh, light bulbs moments is when I've experienced something in my own truth, in my own era, and I go back and read someone's authenticated or narrative of the same as what I've experienced, that peaks the little antennas up. Well, I've experienced that, but they wrote that thousands of years ago.
Right.
Do you see what? Did you find that as well when you were going through?
One of the things, like the last time we were together, I talked about thresholds and awakening people.
Yeah.
When you feel like you're in an awakened state, you still have these thresholds, right? So these thresholds in the awakened state are a bit different.
Mm-hmm.
What happens is you hear something that pertains to ancient whatever or right now, and it gives you this light bulb moment.
Yeah.
And then when you go back to all the things that you've already read and you thought you understood, you see a different perspective of it.
Absolutely.
And this is happening.
Oh, you're lagging a bit. You're lagging a little bit. You've frozen slightly. You're looking good though, Frozen. We're just waiting for Rob to unfreeze. He does have, sometimes his internet plays up and he may have to go off and he may have to come back. But we'll just hang in here and try to remember where we were. So yeah, while we're waiting for Rob to return, if you haven't seen The Analogy of the Cave, Plato, I do recommend it. It's not too long. There is on YouTube, and I'm sure someone else has done it. Oh, we lost Rob, and we are hoping to get him back. He's coming back. He's coming back in. He's back.
That was on my end. That was my end.
I did explain to the audience. Now, I don't know where we were, but I spoke about the analogy of the cave. And how that is, and you were talking about waking up and light bulb moments.
Right. So when you're in an awakened state, there's this thresholds, right? There's still thresholds that you're going through. Mm. And when you hit these specific points, whether it's something that happens now or something else you read from the past, that makes you go back and reread all of these texts in a different perspective now because of what you just learned, which is the ultimate guise of learning.
Yes.
Your situation now is changing, so everything you see that you've either seen before or is to come is changing. And this is actually happening to me right now because I told you with my fiance that we had contact on the front porch with a craft that wasn't very low, it was very high, but we knew it was something out of the ordinary. Yeah. And she is not a believer in any of this, and she saw it and she says, I have no fucking idea what that was. Right? So now, within my timeline of this body, I have to go back and reevaluate different situations, right? Now, it's almost every situation, because even when it comes to the research, it's like, was I given that to read, or did I choose to read that? Was that part of a plan, or was that me just being interested? But also I have to go back and be like, remember that time you fell asleep on the couch, but you woke up on another couch? Yeah. What happened during that time? And it's a reevaluation of all the things that I thought were there, which is actually one of the, for me, I love those moments because it gives me such drive to figure it out.
Passion, it's a joy. I mean, I'm going through the period now, the last few weeks, and hence why I got a new canvas up with the Mukaba on it and the beings coming in. that I'm reevaluating due to contact, the recent contact with I say totally different beings. There are beings that they've reminded me were with me many times before, but I just didn't register as you did. Now's the time. And I'm looking at contact experiences that I perceived one way. Now I'm perceiving them totally different in a whole new concept, because these beings that I had experienced multiple times, and they're not the greys I'm talking about, I just don't know why I never questioned it, but that happens when you're a contactee. It just, okay, that happened, and you move on. But now I'm going, oh my God, was that you? And you feel this, yeah. So I'm even reevaluating the contact experiences.
Absolutely. When I first had this contact, at first I was, I was in that excited mode. Like, I've talked to so many people who have had it, and this is my first acknowledgement of it. And then it happened again 2 weeks later. But at first I was like, awesome, this is amazing. But after the fact, I said to myself, did I manifest that happening? Because I've always wanted my fiance to get into what I do and understand where I come from with certain things. And, there is a bit of a disconnect. She kind of has that dogmatic religious view, and I respect it. Yeah. If that's what you want to do, and I understand, at least you're practicing spiritually something, right? You're not void of spirit. So did I manifest this because I wanted her to be a part of this lifestyle so bad that I called them to me to prove to her that this stuff is real?
She manifested it herself, darling. That's my truth.
Very well could have. I mean, it's in the air. I'm just grateful it happened.
I've met many. I always say to some people say to me, "Oh, that person's never going to wake up." I said, "Please don't say that." I've seen people that are absolute arseholes. I used to be one of those arseholes, by the way.
I think we all were at one point, right? Everybody is.
And trust me, and you'll look at something, nah, they're never going to. But they are on their journey, and they will, and it will come in a way. And in fact, every Homo sapiens is going to experience it eventually. So my truth is, no, they manifested it. Don't ever think that no one's not going to wake up, because as I said, I did. There you go.
It's kind of a dire prediction to think that there's just some souls that are just lost.
It's
I know people like that too, and I'm not one to follow that. I think like I always talk about on every time I hit Clubhouse or my shows, what we just talked about in the awakening process is thresholds. That initial moment is a threshold.
Yes.
All those people are waiting for is that one profound piece of information or one profound word that changes their perception of what their reality really is.
And what can happen, I'm not saying it is, because it's not your girlfriend, it's not my experience. But like I just said earlier on, I'm now reevaluating contact experience with these higher frequency beings, actually, who call themselves the Elohim. But when I was experiencing before, I've never forgotten the contact. But every time I went, oh yeah, just okay, that's that, fine, right, and nothing. And that can happen with someone who just sees a UFO and goes, well, what the fuck was that? And then gets on and does their life, goes shopping. At some point, it's coming back at you at the right time, in the right place for that being to have that light bulb moment. The information, I always say, and this is my truth, so I'm not saying you have to believe it, but I've come to understand every time a being sees a UFO is because that craft, that consciousness in that craft wanted you to see it. And at the same time, there's a connection. You may not be, as many times I wasn't, consciously aware of any information that's gone in or any data that's gone in, that there's like a switch at this point, at this time, ding, we're going to turn you on. It will happen because
comes in later, all the time.
I don't believe, there are some, only, these ones will awaken. No, every soul is going to awaken. And it's just the different exciting journeys we're all on.
Absolutely.
However, we've digressed, and we always digress, me and you.
Sorry.
It's all your fault, and it's never my fault.
It is my fault. It's my hat. It's the hat's fault. Blame it on the hat.
And that gangster dialect that, James Cagney. So I got lost. We went off. Got lost. So come on, let's go back to the richness of this conversation, is how the history, we got to Plato, we got to the mythologies, and you went deep into that. What I found going in that area, for the first time, I had a glimpse of, and then it died for decades, but it was, we are the gods. And then it died. And I never uttered it ever again. I found Zeus, Poseidon, the Oracle of Delphi really interests me, because being a psychic medium, however it would, and all of that. And I had a period where I had this feeling like, we're the gods, but little g, but I'm not that and that. And then all of a sudden it went, died down. Research. Did you find, by researching mythology and Plato and the gods, did that do anything to you that really
the specific gods I started to relate to in a personal way, like Aries? I'm a fire sign, and my birth sign, my zodiac sign is an Aries. And he's the god of war, but he's more. And it seemed like a lot of my life up to that point, with the ups and downs, was a bit of a war. It was me warring with myself, and there was two sides. There was the intellectual side, and then there was this impulse side. That really, they were button heads. It's like, do we go out to the party, or do we stay home and read the book? When I was younger, 9 times out of 10, I was going to go out into that party and hang out and have fun. But you start to, when I got towards the Aboriginals and the Native Americans, it switched a little bit. I started looking at the Great Spirit, or the All Father, and looking at dream time and dream time to meditation. Initiations and rites of passage and ritual. And how, even in society today, we have those rituals and those rites of passage. And the correlation made me it made everything slow down. And I'm like, wow, what else am I missing? So now I'm at this point where it's like, I really feel anything is possible. And if somebody brings something to me, as wild as it possibly sounds, I want to back up their statement with something that's related or relative to what they're talking about. Now, that's not to say that if somebody says, cheese was made on the moon and they brought it back, then I'm going to be like, bullshit. I call bullshit. But the thing, the theories that are more thought out, more detailed, even as crazy as they are, and there's something that I'm trying to prove right now, and I'm going to tell you my take on Atlantis.
Okay.
Very quickly. So what happens? We know that the Earth goes through Yuga cycles. There's trials and tribulations halfway through the Yuga cycle, and then mankind either gets knocked back to the Stone Age, or they excel. So Atlantis excelled. They beat their trouble and moved forward. So Atlantis was never an island. If you've seen the show Stargate Atlantis, that's what Atlantis was. It was a flying city. Okay. So how do you power a city? There's different ways. One of the things that they did was they had probably had these cords, these big tubes that went down into the center of the Earth, and they were harnessing geothermal energy to power the cities. Then Lemuria comes. Lemuria was on land. Atlantis was of the sea. Some of the Atlanteans went to Lemuria because they were outcasted by Atlanteans. So now that's an intermingling race. The resources are somewhat having an effect on the planet, and they don't like it. There's a lot of different interaction between extraterrestrials, and the Lumerians and the Atlanteans are trading. Now, there's a moment when the Atlanteans say, "We have they were never from this Earth. They came here."
Mm-hmm.
So what they do is they come, they stay for a couple of generations, and then they move on because they want the children to grow up, not in space where they're going to be different. They want to, like a yellow sun and gravity, and they get their muscles and all that. So either that or there was some type of war where Atlantean technology hit the Lumerians and now they were battling each other, and it was going to get so bad. So as opposed to fighting, or maybe it was just time, I don't know the reason, they pulled up those geothermal cords back into the spaceship, which caused the Earth's core to basically radiate more heat than it was supposed to. And basically what happens is the world floods, the polar caps melt, and then that's when they leave. They create this catastrophe, which the Lumerians barely survive. Maybe 2, 3, who knows? Only a few survive. And this is what gives us to like our modern man, right? So after this specific flood comes the Ice Age, because the Yuga cycle, and there was something that happened where the sun was blocked out, whether it be a volcanic explosion, because when you manipulate the Earth's core, it's going to shoot out through the volcanoes.
Okay.
So basically there was a lot of geothermal activity, which caused the ring of fire to spew dust, and now everything is flooded. So the sun is blocked out for 5 years. Here comes the Ice Age. And from that Ice Age comes modern man.
Is this the research? Is this what you're actually researching at the moment?
This is what I'm actually looking into right now to try and correlate what I'm talking about with what they believe by taking core samples of the Earth, of the history, of the geological history of the planet.
I mean, that's not what I'm into at the moment. I've just done an alternative history on the show 2 nights ago as well.
We're doing an event on that soon too. The real world history.
The nights I've just touched on re-evaluation alternative of the Knights Templars, and obviously I see them as the protection of the initiation. They're part of the initiation, but that's off the thing. But I'm looking at. I do recall when I was studying, oh God, years ago, and I can't recall. There's too much information. Someone raised something about, and it was in India, and it's in their text, that they had these beings fighting in the heavens above Earth.
It was in Indian text.
Yes, and the gods and the chariots. Yep. And there was
the bow with the fire.
Yeah, that's it. So there were like 2 civilizations in the sky fighting these beings. And also there was research done. I can't recall who it was, but it was a geophysicist, and they were testing some rocky areas, whatever. And I'm not up on this, as you can tell, but I'm just giving you the gist of it. And it's just talking about what you said about the core. And they said there had been a nuclear explosion on Earth thousands of years ago, because they'd found, I'm trying to visualize the video, the documentary I watched years ago.
They found sediment from that explosion.
And it was like melted glass, as it would with nuclear fusion.
Right.
And certain rocks cannot be melted, or crystals of rocks at a certain temperature, but only nuclear. And I was like, what the? So there was, and when I saw that documentary, which I cannot recall, and more likely somebody out there knows what I'm talking about, then I related it to the Indian texts of the gods. They were the gods, which we call the gods. And there was a war on Earth, and there was...
Well, where the gods came from, there was no death, there was no need, there was no want. And then when they came through that hole, once they pulled the tree up, they came down with the Sky Mother, and the Great Spirit came later. But all of that makes sense, right? Like, so what I'm saying to you is the Atlanteans didn't sink. They took off and left.
There you go. That's interesting. I mean, I don't agree or disagree. To me, I'm so changing. Everything's just coming too fast at the moment.
One of the things I tried to do was I tried to base it in modern science.
Yeah.
So it's easy for people who aren't of this type of conversation
I'm with
can
you.
kind of grasp it too.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, like evidence, the fact that when I saw this documentary, I'm sure it's on YouTube somewhere, at a certain part of Earth, and they said the scientists said there has been a nuclear explosion, and our contemporary scientists didn't do the bomb to, what was it, 40 whatever. That for me is like, oh, so that's true. That is so again, but I wasn't too interested. I wasn't obsessed to go down that road. I'm sure there's others out there that really have already done the work, and I'm very ignorant of this. But that could coincide with what you're talking about. It's
absolutely. And that's the thing, is it's just a theory, and it can probably never be proven.
It doesn't matter.
But when I listen to myself saying it and when I hear it, then I find that information, it clicks. It makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Now, it's just one of the many things that I work on. But
that's how it goes. And wouldn't it be boring, if we all studied the same thing or researched the same
or if we knew the answer to everything? I don't want to know the answer to everything. I love to learn. I am the forever student.
I love the light bulbs. When you get the light bulbs, Rob.
Yeah.
That's what it means.
Those are threshold moments. Those are those threshold moments.
It's just wonderful. And I'm still getting my head around why every time, whether contact or something happens, and I just get on with my life like nothing's ever happened. But then later on down the line, I'm going, what the fuck? Click on, you go, oh, what? Why didn't I respond? Why didn't I react? This, and
you didn't know better at the time. You didn't know better.
Yeah, but it's the way it's supposed to. I'm learning now. So now, for me, when I have any contact experiences like which I did recently, as it occurred, I thought, I'll just, and I just got on, and it wasn't long after. So this time there wasn't a gap. It was in 24 hours. I'm toddling about doing that, and boom, the delay was hours.
Right. That sounds like me when I have a thought that I don't know where it came from, or it's completely absent of what I'm doing at the moment. I write it down, and I have a 7-page list of those types of thoughts that I have to go back and traverse and see if I can prove, disprove, or figure out what I was thinking of at that time. And I love doing that. That's one of the things I do almost all. When I have a relaxed day and I'm not working, that's what I'm doing, is I'm still researching and making sure that my head's in a book somewhere,
I'm with you. When my relaxed time is, I don't pick up a book. I stay in, my space, and it's discernment, whatever you want to call it, introspection. And I talk to myself, go, no, that doesn't, no, what was that? What was that? What was that? And normally then something comes in and I go, like this. But it's, for me, people think history is boring. Well, it is the traditional educational history. It is really boring. However, ancient civilizations, and I did watch the series from way back, and the man with the hair sticking out his head, what was he called?
Giorgio Tsoukalos.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
I would love to talk to him, just to pick his brain. And Eric Von Daniken. My friend Paul Wallace just got interviewed by Eric Von Daniken. And I know Paul pretty well now. We've been working together on a lot of things, but that would be the ultimate goal, is to talk to Eric Von Daniken.
All of them, even though the hair really sort of freaked me out, it was very scary with the hair. I'm coming from the if you're coming from the Homo sapien woman perspective, a bit like your hair on a bad day, Rob, isn't it? When you're just awake. No, naughty me, bad me. No, but what they did, these guys, you've got to give credit where credit dues, where credit is due. These guys opened the door of the imagination. Is it called the
they paved the conscious way for the conversations.
The Nazca line, and I remember, and I'm watching it, and people are poo-pooing, and I'm saying, no, hold on a minute, you cannot see these lines unless you're up in the sky.
Yeah. What
And
would be the
all-
purpose of them if not
and
for that?
And for me, I'm going, oh my. So these guys that the first, was it ancient? No, the first one wasn't called Ancient Aliens, was it?
Yeah. Ancient Aliens was the first.
What's the recent one they're doing? It's
with
similar.
William Shatner.
Yeah, I haven't watched that because
That's like Unexplained Mysteries or something like that,
whatever,
where they
yeah.
talk about that
But
stuff.
the originals, what I watched all of them, and again, and the information they opened the door of the imagination. They opened the door for us to be able to question history.
They consciously paved the way for an open conversation and made it more mainstream, and actually gave us more of a utility, I think, to meet like-minded people, because people weren't afraid to come out and say it anymore.
Yeah, they weren't like, there were many back in the day that, and there's still some today, famous people, they're egotistic. It's my way or the highway. You believe my truth or not at all. No, these guys, they allowed you to expand and look at every option. What do you think? And it was always like, so that they deserve the credit. They were like
absolutely. Michael Cremo actually asked me,
he was a
published author who is known.
He was lovely
for the Vedas, and
who was the other one, Rob? Oh, sorry to interrupt. And he was the one that did the weather stuff on the Sphinx in Egypt, and he found. Oh my God, he passed. Bless him, Doctor.
Frederick. What's his name? Stan Friedman.
No, not him. No, he was an archaeologist, Egyptologist. He was a geophysicist, whatever. And he did a lot of work on the Sphinx and said that was water erosion. There was water erosion so all those, I can't remember his name. The audience.
I'm looking it up right now.
Yeah. All of these, they're like our peers, our history buffs that opened the door to our imagination and made it permissible and accessible for us to go and take it further. And today we have great guys out there today and women taking it further and further. I had Mohammed Ibrahim on my podcast a few weeks ago. My God, I sat there. I chat for England.
Uh-huh.
I don't shut up. I was gobsmacked with the information and data he was coming out with. He shifted everything I knew about Egypt. And then another one will come on and he'll shift me some more. So this is what it's about. And closing the show, I don't want to close it without taking this history buff of yours further, is you've done all this, and obviously it's going to become obvious to the audience why you've had this lifelong experience coming through spirituality and history and research, because you are, and you spoke on the other show, you are collecting, and you tell what you're doing now for the future.
So what we're doing is there's a few of us now that are creating a database, and the database is going to be about contact, and the community is going to dictate the contact information that goes into it. So it's cultivated by the database, cultivated by the community of contact, spiritual teachings, ancient texts, and knowledge and forbidden knowledge, or histories that were not so mainstream. It's going to have mainstream history, but it's also going to have the dovetailing of forbidden histories and different perspectives. So one of the points of doing that is our ancestors put cave paintings on the walls for us to find and figure out what they were about.
Absolutely.
So to help, what they did is they wanted to leave legacies, and they wanted to help the future generations figure things out faster. Right, figured it out faster. So this is what we're doing. We're going to be putting it in book form. We're going to be putting it in website form, and I'm going to see if there's any type of way that I can put it on a crystal. Get the information and download it to a crystal.
Wow.
Therefore, no matter what happens in our future, this moment, our understanding of who and what we are will be passed on to future generations in hopes that they can excel faster past where we are now and develop even more into their future. It's about our children, our children's children, and our children's children's children, and helping them create this sort of society that is classified, enhanced human, not enhanced biotech wise, enhanced spiritually, consciously, frequency, and vibration.
Wonderful. Thank you very, very much, Rob. That was a fantastic conversation. That was lovely. I'll have to rewatch it and go back in and see exactly what we said, because it just goes over the top of my head. You know, when you interview it just
of course.
I got really excited at some points, you know, as you know.
You hear something and then you're like, okay, let me make a question out of that. How can I purpose this question properly? I do it all the time.
Before we end the podcast, do you want to sell yourself shamelessly? Your websites, your podcasts?
Sure. So I'm on YouTube under Full Spectrum Universe, which is in my name. We're on, I think, episode 40 something. We've been going for about a year. We're also that's the spiritual aspect, and the history aspect is on YouTube. What I've done recently is I've gone on Rumble and made more of a political show, but a political show with a little bit of spiritual discernment within it. So we're on Full Spectrum Universe on Rumble and BitChute. Also, we're getting into the far red infrared saunas that are super great to detoxify your body. So we have a website, Spectrum Light Health, and essentially what it does is, you know, it helps a lot. It alleviates a lot of symptoms of ailments and helps create it makes your body feel like it has a fever. So it literally gets rid of all the harmful toxins that you get through your water, your air, you know, food.
So and they can get that on your website.
Yes. And if you use the code Spectrum, you'll get $50 off. It's $1,400 product. It's actually $2,000, but we got it discounted down to $1,400. But then you get an additional $50 off with the Spectrum promo code. And it's something that I've done. I've taken a lot of time to look at the better products and what can really help people and help you today, not where you have to take it for a week and it has to be absorbed. But one of the other things that I love to tell people is that this brings your body back to zero. So if you start to use supplements and things like that, sometimes it's hard with all the other stuff that we have that our body's taking into, like, basically support that supplement. This brings your body back to zero, so you get the full amount of gusto out of all your vitamins and minerals that you take. So it's something that it helps day to day, and if you know, a couple minutes a day, and it could change your life. It's done it for me for sure.
If anyone's interested in that, then you know how to get hold of Rob.
Yes,
Rob, thank you so much. It's been great. Always a conversation with you.
Always. We always have stunning conversations.
We always do. We always digress somewhere.
Of course, that's just how it works. It's just
how it works. It's organic. It's organic. So thank you everybody for watching Inception, a podcast special. You can find the show on the Forbidden Knowledge News Network, where there are some amazing podcasts on there now, and also on Facebook, the normal YouTube. And to the next time we have the conversation, I don't know who it's going to be next time, actually. Thank you, Rob, so much. And bye, guys.
Always an honor and a privilege to be here, for sure.
See you soon.